And welcome back. We got a ton of news today. We're going to start with Canada before we get into Putin, Trump, and Xi. There's a ton of news coming from all of those regions. This is my first time on Kick as well as Twitch, so we'll see if I have enough bandwidth to actually go to 3 platforms at once, and I'll have to check if the streams are working after. I'm not too sure how the platforms work at this point. We're primarily on YouTube. If we do have any Spanish viewers, we do have a Spanish show as well on our YouTube platform, and Nat and the Guy in Spanish on YouTube. Okay, let's get into the first article here. I do have my producer Nat over here. She's going to be reading the articles and kind of helping me out. Hopefully giving opinions.
Hold on.
Okay, and we got some Canadian news. There was actually breaking Canadian news to go along with this headline story today. So let's get right into it.
From Mr. Sunshine Baby, Alberta Victory, Daniel Smith and Mark Carney struck a deal to support a pipeline to the BC West Coast. The Prime Minister agreed to cancel woke environmental requirements for the new pipeline project that do nothing but create more delays. This is a win for the oil and gas sector.
Well, and this was the first news coming out of Canada today, and I was fairly happy about it. Me and Nat are originally from Canada. We now live in Mexico because the political situation in Canada is just completely woke and untenable. That being said, there's an update to the story, so we'll get right into the second article just so we can combine the two because they are connected.
From Pierre Polyev, Carney wants to block the pipeline without taking the blame, so he's handed EB a pipeline veto that violates our constitution. Only the federal government and the Prime Minister have the constitutional power to approve interprovincial pipelines. He must get out of the way now so builders can build.
Okay, so we can go back to the first story just so I can stay with that headline and people can kind of follow along. Okay, Mark Carney is a starch environmentalist. Sorry about my dog there. She's going a little crazy. Carney's a starch environmentalist. He didn't want to build any pipelines, but Alberta is threatening to have a separation movement from Canada. If that happens, it will be the end of Canada. So he's looking for some kind of compromise. That being said, it looks like he's wanting to take the credit without building the pipeline. So he's given David Eby, which is the premier of BC, the right to veto this. Eby has already said he will veto this unless his pockets and some native tribes' pockets in BC are getting lined. I don't think this pipeline is going to get built. I think this is going to help the Alberta separatist movement actually want to leave Canada if this pipeline doesn't go through. I really think that's the best thing because at this point, even if they do build this pipeline, it's too little too late. Canada has treated Alberta and Albertans like the doormat of Canada for far too long. Okay, we do have one more Canadian story before I think I go into geopolitics and a broader base here.
From Stephen Bonk, Liberals chased the 1.5 billion, that's billion, potash project out of Canada. We have the largest potash mine in the world in my writing. Why would $1 billion potash facility prefer to be located in the United States? Taxes and regulations.
Yeah, and all kind of manufacturing as well as natural resource companies are leaving Canada and going to the United States. Trump is kind of luring them down there with investment, with better tax cuts and things of this nature. That being said, this is a huge loss for Canada. Canada just seems to be getting loss after loss after loss. If this continues to happen and the manufacturing sector in Canada continues to leave, I think we're going to see Mark Carney eventually have to break and go in much more into oil and gas pipelines because that's where Canada's strength is. It's in the natural resource sector. Mark Carney just doesn't seem to realize that. He's trying to become the leader of the globalists. It seems like the entire EU is getting behind him, and he is the one kind of confronting Trump with a lot of different agenda propositions.
Do you want me to play the video?
Yeah, we can play the video here.
Oh, there's no sound.
And going to the United States. This is happening every day, and if that can happen for a business like Nutrien, imagine what's happening to little businesses all across Canada. Our regulations are making it impossible to get anything done in this country. This is what Liberals like Stephen Guilbeault and our Prime Minister just don't understand. When you have too much regulation in one jurisdiction and make it too hard to do any business, they're going to leave for somewhere else.
Half of gas, 3/4 of coal, etc., maybe up as much as half of oil reserves, proven reserves, need to stay in the ground if we're going to get to where we are.
We have the largest producing potash mine in the entire world at Souris Moose Mountain. And there is no reason why they cannot be building this facility in Canada, other than the over-regulation, over-taxation, and overburdening from the people in this building. And that's because of Liberal policy. It's almost impossible to build or create anything in Canada anymore. We have the industrial carbon tax, we have clean fuel standards, we have regulations that make it almost impossible to get anything that much difference.
And I used to work in the mining industry in Canada as well as the oil and gas industry, and it seems like there was a lot of special interest groups being financed by Russia and China to legislate Canadian natural resources out of existence or make it extremely hard to profit from, kind of blocking a lot of projects, especially when you have a Liberal government like Justin Trudeau and now Mark Carney. Okay, let's go into the next story if we can. And I think we're going to get a little bit more into geopolitics if I'm correct.
Yes, from Bruce McGonigal, Council for the Cowichan First Nations is telling people in Richmond they must seek approval of the Cowichan tribe to sell their property. This has been something I have warned about since the quoted video from November 4th, where they stated they want to have the title claim over all the property they're challenging for in court. As for Dallas Brody, I take grave exception to her notion that supporting truth and reconciliation for past wrongs means we support First Nation land title claims that remove private property rights.
Okay, we can kind of leave it there. We'll get into the clip in just a moment, but this is one more Canadian story. I kind of forgot I had this one. This one is pretty significant. You're seeing private property ownership possibly becoming a thing of the past in Canada if the Supreme Court of Canada kind of upholds this ruling in the long run. But before that happens, the Cowichan tribe has been awarded, a lot of people that have private property ownership in Canada has been awarded their property. So there's a big conflict kind of happening. Can private property owners actually sell this property now that it's been awarded to an Aboriginal tribe? That being said, the Aboriginal tribe is trying to let private property owners know, you have to let us know before you sell your property, which I'm going to assume at that point, they're going to say, no, you can't sell your property. This is not only significant for Canada. I keep up on this story a lot on a lot of these Aboriginal land stories because I think there is a bigger notion here where they want to bring this into other countries like Mexico, like Europe. They're now laying claim, a lot of these Aboriginal tribes in Canada, to entire cities in Canada. You're also having American Aboriginal tribes laying claim to property in Canada. Canada could become the 51st state, not because of Donald Trump, but because of American Aboriginal tribes. Very interesting what's going on. This is a consistent through line on a lot of my shows that we do. That being said, let's go into the next story now. And I swear to God, my dog just loves to bark as soon as I start recording every single night. Okay.
Moving on to the U.S., Bombshell Senate report exposes that the Biden administration forced at least 11 airports to house illegal aliens and migrants, despite warnings that might place American travelers at risk. This is a betrayal of historic proportion. Federal agencies were directed to find airport facilities that could be used as shelters or migrant processing centers.
Yeah, and this was a process under the Biden administration where no, illegal aliens aren't coming in, only legal aliens. Then it was, yes, illegal aliens are coming in. Then it's like, no, we're not busing them to different regions. We're definitely not flying them to different regions. All this is kind of coming out now. They were processing it and storing them at airports for quite a long time. Let's get into the article here.
The video?
Yeah, sorry, the video. And this is coming from Fox News.
Biden administration allegedly pressured airports to house migrants despite warnings it could compromise safety and put travelers at risk. That according to a new bombshell Senate report that says the Biden administration directed federal agencies to find airport facilities that could be used as shelters or migrant processing facilities. At least 11 airports were allegedly asked to find space, including Chicago's O'Hare and JFK here in New York. All right.
Okay, that's
Biden administration
pretty good.
allegedly pressured.
And I just want to kind of keep up on that because I think there is going to be a lot more scandals coming out of what happened under the Biden administration. Today also we're seeing Apple and a lot of other big tech companies as well as retail companies letting massive amounts of workers go just before the holidays. We're seeing the rise of AI starting to take workers' jobs. That being said, if that is the case, I think the support for Trump trying to exit illegal immigrants from the country will gain more and more support. Okay, if you don't know how the show works, because this is our first time on Twitch and Kick, I go through about maybe 20 to 30 articles, so it's posts, so it's quite dense. So I go through them fairly quickly. But if you want to catch up on the news of the day, this is the best way to do it. If you're not liked and subscribed, please do so, especially on Kick and Twitch. I think we have no subscribers at this point, so it would be nice to kind of see some support on those platforms. Okay, let's go to the next article here.
From Howard Lutnick, the message is simple. If Europe eases up on its digital regulatory chokehold and creates a level playing field for American companies, it opens the door to hundreds of billions, even $1 trillion in new investment. That's what a fair, balanced trade relationship can unlock.
Okay, let's see what Lutnick said here, and then I'm going to kind of get into it, because I think this is a better game plan for the EU. The EU has so much red tape and regulations, just like Canada. A lot of private industry does not want to go there. They definitely don't want to build manufacturing there with extremely high energy costs and high regulations. But if Lutnick can bring the AI sector and other sectors over there, it would be absolutely phenomenal for the West. A lot of private businesses are turning away from these Western countries now. Right now, we're seeing a huge investment in the global South as well as the U.S. The U.S. is the one country that is getting mass private investment from the private sector.
European Union does is they say, well, our digital rules, they only touch companies above a certain threshold. Of course, the only companies above those thresholds are all American companies. So come on, that can't be the rule. Let's take it off. Let's settle the outstanding cases against Google and against Microsoft and against Amazon. Let's put them behind us. Let's come up with a reasonable framework where these companies can grow and build, and then those companies will agree to invest hundreds of billions of dollars of data centers here. So the idea is if they take their foot off this regulatory framework and make it more inviting for our companies, they can get the benefit of hundreds of billions, possibly $1 trillion of investment a year. So the idea is I'm trying to convince them that winning the way Donald Trump is winning in America is the way to go. Look at America. Look at these growth rates. Come on. Do you realize our investment in AI CapEx last quarter exceeded consumer spending in America? We had 3.8% GDP growth.
Okay,
we're going to grow over 4%.
And this kind of brings up the fact that the EU is absolutely loving censorship right now. They're seeing it's a regular thing to go to the well to find these companies like Google, like Apple, like Facebook, billions of dollars, and collect this on an annual basis and force censorship down those big American tech companies' throats. I completely disagree with this. That being said, it's an interesting strategy. I just don't know if the EU is willing to play ball with American tech companies. I think they like censorship too much. We're seeing the rise of a lot of right-wing parties like the AfD in Germany. We do got a couple stories on them coming up, but if they do rise and the right takes power, maybe they'll play ball with the big tech companies a lot more than the left is and the globalists are currently in Europe and the UK. Okay, let's kind of move on and see what we have next here.
From the Patriot Oasis, President Trump has officially signed the executive order modeled after the Manhattan Project that will employ more than 40,000 U.S. scientists and engineers to rapidly advance AI capabilities. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said with this pen today, President Trump signed a historic mission.
Yeah, and this is very interesting. Trump understands to get the edge over China and some of these other big players, AI is where it's going to be at. China has a completely different model when it comes to AI than the US does. The US is investing millions of dollars, almost creating a bubble, and it could backfire on them, where China is being much more efficient on how they're building these models and trying to build in-state products with these models to go to market to kind of finance their AI market rather than creating a bubble. That being said, I had reported last week that a lot of these AI companies were worried about this bubble, and if it did pop, they were kind of implying that they might want a bailout. That being said, I'm much more inclined to give them investment on the front end so the US can get the edge rather than waiting for the bubble to explode and having to bail them out. If that AI bubble does explode, I do not want to see a bailout. I'm sure a lot of American citizens don't want to see a bailout, and I think it would be the wrong move. I did not like when they bailed the banks out. I'm definitely not going to like if they bail out these big tech conglomerates. Okay, and we can play this clip real quick here.
With this pen today, President Trump signed an historic mission. This is reminiscent of the Manhattan Project that brought World War II to an early and successful end, similar to the Apollo projects that put a man on the moon in 1969. This is an all-in national effort to take the power of AI and pair it with the 40,000 outstanding scientists and engineers at our national labs to use the world's largest supercomputers to advance innovation and science, to fix our rising energy costs, to give better economic opportunities for our citizens, to make longer and healthier lives possible. Today was not incremental, Brett. It was transformative. With this pen today,
and that's good.
President Trump.
And the big two hurdles with AI is actually electricity cost and water costs. A lot of the times when these AI data centers are set up in these communities, the cost of electricity will go up for citizens because these big tech companies are using up a lot of power and water in these communities. So I want to see these AI companies kind of hopefully go towards nuclear power. And with the government invested in this, hopefully the US can come from behind and catch up to China when it comes to energy. This AI problem is kind of lighting a fire under the US administration's ass, and rightfully so. I think they've been falling behind for years. Hopefully this is the point where they turn it around and start going towards nuclear. The European Union went hard into green energy in a place that's primarily cloudy, and you can't get enough energy out of green energy for manufacturing or mass industrial purposes. You're really seeing the EU kind of fall apart at this point, and they no longer have traditional forms of energy coming from Russia because of the war. I would have liked to see the EU use green energy as a transitional energy to go towards nuclear, but none of these countries seem to be interested in nuclear, except the US is very interested now. Canada is starting to get interested, only so much so to sell nuclear power to the United States. We'll have to see how that tariff deal kind of works out between them, but so far not so good. Okay, let's go into what do we have next?
From Dustin Grage, a judge in Deep Blue, Hennepin County has overturned the guilty verdict of Abdifatah Yusuf after stealing $7.2 million from taxpayers. The ruling could now open the door for other fraud convictions in Minnesota to be overturned. Jurors are shocked by the decision.
Yeah, and Minnesota has one of the biggest Muslim populations in the country. Texas is close behind them, and they are building a mega Muslim city in Texas. Very interesting what's going on there. But this scandal has been breaking over the last couple weeks. I'm glad to see it's kind of now getting uncovered, and hopefully they hone in on a lot of this stuff. I know Doge was doing an absolutely great job. They're saying it's dismantled, but it's looking like it's still operating within each department and trying to weed out corruption. We can play the clip.
At the August trial for Abdifatah Yusuf, the jury heard evidence that he ran his home health care company Promise Health out of a mailbox at a Central Avenue address where multiple other home health care companies were supposedly located. Yusuf and his wife Lol Ahmed were charged with stealing $7.2 million of taxpayer money through Medicaid overbilling in a personal care assistant or PCA scam. The couple allegedly spent tens of thousands of the fraud money on luxury items for themselves. Despite the jury swiftly convicting Yusuf, Judge Sarah West last week decided they got it wrong.
It's reversing or overturning a jury's verdict.
Defense attorney Joe Tamburino, who's not affiliated with this case, reviewed the decision and analyzed it for KARE 11 News. He says Judge West ruled that the state's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and that she believed the state did not rule out other reasonable inferences.
That, in fact, there could have been other reasonable theories other than guilt in this case. That's what it comes down to.
That's good. And this is a woke judge trying to implement her power, not to allow this judgment to stand. We'll actually go back to the clip in just a moment, because I believe one of the jurors that were on that trial said this was an open and shut kind of case. He has no idea why the judge kind of repealed this. That being said, there is a huge scandal going on in Minnesota right now, and it was this one person running this company, but a lot of people within the Muslim community were the ones on his rolls so he could overcharge them. So hopefully this comes out in mass prosecutions within the state of Minnesota. Let's continue with the clip just a little bit.
The ruling, even Judge West wrote that she is troubled by the manner in which fraud was able to be perpetuated at Promise Health.
I was stunned.
State Representative Kristen Robbins, chair of the House Fraud Prevention and State Oversight Committee, says she's now reviewing if any state laws need to be tightened.
We want to strengthen state law so that we can get prosecutions out of these cases, because clearly a jury thought he was guilty.
Jurors in the case can't believe the decision.
I am shocked. I'm shocked based off of all of the evidence that was presented to us and the obvious guilt that we saw based off of the said evidence. It was not a difficult decision whatsoever. The deliberation took probably 4 hours at most. Based off of the state's evidence that was presented, I was beyond a reasonable doubt.
The attorney for Mr. Youssef, Ian Burrell, sent me a statement today that says, in part, Judge West's ruling affirms what we have maintained from the beginning, that our client, Mr. Youssef, was wrongfully accused and did not commit fraud or racketeering. The Attorney General's office filed an appeal this afternoon, so the Minnesota Court of Appeals will take a second look at this decision.
Okay, that's good. I really do hope that Minnesota Court of Appeals comes to the right conclusion that the jury kind of came to, and there needs to be future prosecutions looking into his client list on who he was overcharging, because it looks like this was mass fraud being conducted against the state. Okay, now we're going to get into what's going on with the Trump administration, and this is pretty big news. There may be a lot of shifts, and I have been calling out certain people in that administration over the last I would say few months, saying these are the cancers in the administration. This is why you're having the split in the conservative movement. And it seems like it's not just me, but a lot of other commentators have been picking out these same names, like Susie Wilds, like Pam Bondi, like Kash Patel. All three of those names kind of came up today, that they may be possibly shifted, fired, or let go, and some big replacements may be coming in. Let's read the headline, and I don't think there's a clip for this particular one.
From Joshua Hall, Sidney Powell is reportedly in talks to replace Pam Bondi as Attorney General, and General Michael Flynn is publicly and privately calling on President Trump to fire Bondi and appoint Powell as the next Attorney General of the United States. Unlike Bondi, Powell isn't just a Fox News lawyer and actually has the guts to fight for free and fair elections and prosecute the deep state. Bondi is all talk, Sidney Powell is action. This would be the best thing that could happen, according to this person, to the Trump administration right now. Sidney Powell understands the weaponization of the DOJ firsthand because she herself was a victim of it. President Trump, do this.
Yeah, and this is the thing. A lot of these names that are being floated around that are people that were previously prosecuted by the Biden administration. So they have a vendetta and they will go after the Democrats and a lot of corruption that's in the government. And I think that's what the base of the MAGA party wants to see right now. With Sidney Powell, they tried to throw her in jail. It was a huge scandal. After January 6th, she was calling out voter machines and a lot of other things. I don't know if she's going to be a great improvement on Pam Bondi, but hopefully she stops, number one, covering up these Epstein files, and number two, she actually goes after her political enemies with hard prosecutions. Some of the other names that are being floated is possibly Michael Flynn to replace maybe Kash Patel of the FBI. That would be fantastic. He was also prosecuted by the Biden administration. And the last name I might want to see that's not being floated, but I'm floating it here now, is possibly Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon helped Donald Trump get elected for both elections, but he was quickly let go both times afterwards. Before he was let go, he was kind of every single day going to Trump saying, we need to follow through on these election promises. And kind of showing Trump, what have you done today? What haven't you done today? How can we kind of follow through? With the midterms coming up and the Conservative Party kind of at war with each other and somewhat breaking apart, if you bring Bannon in, I think he's going to try to get this administration to follow through with a lot of the election promises that were made. And he properly knows how to portray that to the American public so they can see, yeah, we made some mistakes, but we did a lot of good things in the first 100 days. We're now course correcting, and we want to follow through with those promises that were made in the campaign. Okay, let's go into this next one, and this is kind of a continuation. I'm just going to show a series of articles and the names that are being floated for replacements.
From Megatron, Trump is considering replacing FBI Director Kash Patel in the coming months, according to NBC News. Trump and his aides are frustrated by negative headlines surrounding Patel, including scrutiny over his use of bureau resources and conflicts with other Trump allies.
Yeah, so Pam Bondi seemed completely incompetent, and her name is on the hit list for sure. The America First movement wants her out at this point, especially with what happened to the Epstein files. But Kash Patel has to be a close second at this point, especially with his wife going after, oh God, what's that content creator's name? Elijah Schaffer, with a $5 million lawsuit trying to kind of bankrupt him.
It was his girlfriend, not even his wife, right?
Yeah, sorry, his girlfriend. That's getting a little bit out of control when you're going after your actual base, the girlfriend of the FBI director. I've been completely disappointed in Kash Patel. He kind of ran for a complete year through social media, through the podcasting network, that he was going to release the Epstein files, that he was going to make prosecutions, and he was going to kind of go after the deep state. None of that has happened. He's a complete disappointment. I would love to see a reshuffling, especially before the midterms. We can go into the next one, and it's a little bit, yeah.
From Joshua Hall as well, the Trump administration is also considering a New Year's shakeup, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, as well as White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, are reportedly on the hot seat, and replacements are being looked at. The two women are all talk, no action, and in the eyes of many of us, of many people who support President Trump, have been sabotaging this administration from within, starting by firing these two would be a step in the right direction.
Susie Wiles is the big name that needs to go, and she has a lot of power in the administration, so I don't know if they're going to let her go or they'll reshuffle her somewhere else. She's been the one appointing people into jobs and a lot of lobbyists into jobs to kind of shut out Tulsi Gabbard, to kind of shut out RFK, to shut out of a lot of the MAGA or America First and MAGA movement people and their agenda. She's a corporatist. This is why you see the Trump administration moving much more towards the corporate side and away from the election promises that he did made. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel have been a failure at their jobs, but Susie Wiles has been that kind of neocon corporatist in the background, quietly sabotaging the administration. I think she's actually the single most important person that needs to be replaced. I would like to see her completely out of the administration and replaced by a Steve Bannon, at least before the midterms, so Trump can return to a lot of these election promises that he did make. If they get rid of Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Susie Wiles, I think a lot of the base will come back to Trump. And it will signal a course correction in a big way. It also shows that Trump is listening to his base, because these are the three names I've been personally screaming from the mountaintops, and a lot of other content creators have as well. Trump has been bringing in a lot of pollsters and content creators to kind of ask and kind of get the feeling of, why is his base moving away from him? And the answer is simple. He's moving away from his election promises he did make. He's starting to look like a corporatist. He's putting global needs before America's needs. Okay, let's go into this next article here, and this is what Scott Bessent.
So in this next post, Eric Doherty says Scott Bessent reveals President Trump is likely to name Jerome Powell's replacement for Federal Reserve Chair by Christmas. This is very good. It's a very good chance for the president will make an announcement before Christmas.
And this is another huge move. Jerome Powell, it's actually the end of his term, so it's not a big surprise, but it's going to be interesting who he appoints. If somebody gets appointed that is going to really cooperate with the Trump administration. I'm going to really hope for a revitalization of the American economy. A lot of investment dollars have come in. A lot of ground has been broken on manufacturing facilities. It's now time to kind of turn it around with even lower interest rates to kind of pump money into the economy and blow it up before the midterms. When I say blow it up, I mean have a resurgence of the capitalistic economy in the United States. A lot of people are losing confidence in it right now. A lot of corporations are letting people go. We need to turn this around before the midterms. Okay, let's play this thing.
Andrew, I'm still got one interview left, so I don't think it would be prudent to give any hints. And I think that there's a very, very good chance that the president will make an announcement before Christmas. But it's his prerogative whether it's before the Christmas holidays in the New Year's. But things are moving along very well. Andrew,
and that's perfect. And although I have liked Scott Bessent so far in the administration, he does have quite the shady resume. He worked for George Soros for a large number of years, and it always puts a question mark over him. So I'm always keeping a close eye, not letting him go at this point, and focusing more on Susie Wilds, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi would be a great start. That being said, there was something I was going to say.
Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary.
No, let's just keep going with this next story. It was something about Twitch and Kick.
From Levi.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. If you are on Twitch and Kick, this is our first time streaming on those platforms. Hopefully we have enough bandwidth to go to YouTube, Kick, and Twitch. But if you want to make any comments, we are currently watching the comment section on YouTube. So if you want to make comments, you can do it there. Eventually we'll figure out how to
I'm monitoring the other one.
Oh, you are?
Well. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So leave any comments on any of the platforms, and hopefully Nat will see them there for me.
And follow or subscribe or whatever you do on each of those platforms. We're pretty new to those platforms. We're mainly on YouTube, trying things out. From Levi Leatherberry, the truth about the farm bailouts is out, and it's worse than you think. Over the last 8 years, the U.S. government has sent $130 billion in emergency aid to farmers. Sounds good, right? Wrong. The money isn't going to farmers. It's going straight to big corporations. Here's how it works. Farmers like Adam and Scott get a bailout, but the money immediately goes to the corporations they owe for seeds, fertilizer, machinery, anything they need to farm. Meanwhile, the cost of those inputs has tripled since the 90s. Farmers are paying way more for the same things, but the prices they get for their crops barely enough to cover it. They're breaking even at best. But the mega corporations, they're raking in huge profits. Monsanto and Bayer merged in 2015, and no one stopped them. Now a handful of companies control almost everything: seeds, fertilizer, machinery. So let's break it down. Farmers might grow $500 per acre, but they're paying $490 for inputs. That's how these companies inflate prices and squeeze farmers dry. And when farmers can't make ends meet, the same corporations go to you, the taxpayer, for a bailout. Instead of lowering prices, they're laundering your tax dollars to keep their profits sky high. The agricultural industry is a multi-billion-dollar scam. The government is just letting it happen. Farmers deserve better. It's time to fight back and take control of the food system.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the big scandals, not only happening in America, but happening in all these Western countries. Politicians have figured out how to line their pockets and their buddies in big corporation, whether it's Monsanto to Tyson Foods. They are getting billion-dollar bailouts or billion-dollar worth of grant money to kind of not only keep these companies afloat, but create a monopoly within this industry. I want to see a revitalization of small farmers, not only within the US, but all around the world. I think it's safer for this food supply. It may cost a little bit more, but overall, you're going to have a much better opportunity here to create real livelihoods amongst small farmers and have a better food product overall.
Well, and here in Mexico, we also saw the blockades of highways yesterday from the agricultural sector and the transport sector. So all the truck drivers completely blocked all entrances, not just to Mexico City, but any major city. And they were complaining of exactly the same thing. The government helping and aiding the big corporations while they have to manage and essentially give all of their produce and everything they produce to the big corporations as well.
Well, and they're also squeezing small farmers, making them have less and less cattle on their farms, saying farms can only be a certain size, especially in the EU. They're doing this. We're having big corporations buy up massive plots of farmland, increasing the price of farmland across the nation, pricing out small farmers. I would like to see a reverse migration from cities to farmlands and have the United States government stop funding these big corporations and start funding individual families. It would be a great reverse migration if it could happen, not only in the US, but I like to see it happen all over the world.
There was a video there. Do you want me to play it?
Yeah, we can play it a little bit. I can't remember what the video was.
I think it's from More Perfect Union, which is more of a lefty site, but sometimes they have good documentaries on these specific issues.
Give it to our farmers.
Over the last 8 years, the federal government has sent farmers over $130 billion in emergency aid. But when you follow where that money actually goes, it reveals who's really profiting from this system and why more bailouts won't fix it.
So when I get an aid package, okay, that money will never come to me. It comes straight through my hands into whoever I...
Real farmer, that's a real farmer, not Bill Gates. Bill Gates is the largest private owner of farmland in the United States. That's not who I want making my food. I want somebody like this.
I owe the money to.
When federal money is sent to farmers who have debts, like Adam, Scott, and most small farmers, they quickly pass it on to the companies they borrowed from to buy the products they need to farm, like seed, fertilizer, and machinery. And the combined cost of those inputs have risen far faster than what farmers can sell their crops for on the market. Farmers pay 3 times higher on inputs than they did in the 1990s.
What has gotten us to this point is the mergers and consolidations of ag input suppliers. In 2015, Monsanto and Bayer merged. They were competing against each other. And that was during Obama's administration. They didn't do a thing about that. They let it happen. They let it happen. When I started farming, we had 5 or 6 Arkansas-based seed companies. Monsanto, there's none. There's none. They're all owned by Bayer or Pioneer.
In the last 40 years, thousands of seed companies have merged into 3.
Yeah, and these seed companies are absolutely ridiculous. They've genetically modified these seeds, so you're getting only GMO seed options, and these seeds are only good for 1 season, so you can't have your own seeds. If you have your own seeds and it blows on to another farm that has these Monsanto GMO seeds, you will get sued to the point where you could possibly lose your farm. We've covered this with a few farmers in the past. It's Monsanto really trying to make a monopoly out of the farming industry. Also, the EU is really looking at food and agriculture as a way to control their populations. That's why they want to push out these small farmers and really have this public-private partnership with big agricultural corporations to really put the squeeze on people in the European Union. I'd be very concerned.
Do you want me to keep playing it?
Yeah, let's keep playing it.
46 fertilizer firms have merged into 4, and just 2 farm machinery companies dominate the markets for tractors and combines.
Just for easy numbers, say I'm going to make $500 an acre gross on an acre of whatever. Well, those companies know that, and they will price their stuff up to like $490. The lack of competition is the reason they can keep those prices inflated, and there's nothing we can do about it.
That ability to raise prices is a big part of why, while farmers are just breaking even, major input companies maintain steadily high profit margins.
I'm calling whatever the heck is happening in the world of agriculture a bull market of insane proportions.
They're going to push us up to the brink, and then when they tip us over the edge, they're going to go to the taxpayer for the balance. Instead of lowering their prices and taking a cut in their margin, they're just laundering tax money.
And that's pretty good. And I think some of the big issues of our day is digital ID, digital currency, and I think farming is the close third. I talk a lot about digital ID and digital currency, but I try to add these farm stories in whenever I can because if we lose our farmers, we lose our future. These political parties need to really focus on blue-collar workers and farmers. I think that should be the base of any political party's foundation because that's really the base of a good, strong society. Okay, and this one kind of went along with that other one. That's why I grabbed this article. It is about pesticides and very concerning.
Funnily, from PBS News, the EPA is starting to allow the use of pesticides containing PFAS or PFAS on food. The move is part of an effort to roll back the regulation of what are called forever chemicals because they don't break down easily in the environment. And it is interesting that this is coming from PBS because before PBS was trying to obscure the story as a lot of traditional media with the PFAS when it was a MAGA issue, but now apparently they're talking about it.
The EPA is starting to allow the use of pesticides containing PFAS on food. It's part of an effort to roll back the regulation of what are called forever chemicals because they don't break down easily in the environment. Last week, the agency approved the use of 2 new pesticides that qualify as PFAS. It means that farmers could spread them on crops like romaine lettuce, broccoli, and potatoes. The Washington Post is reporting that agency plans to approve 4 more pesticides. Not much is known about their long-term impact, but PFAS have been linked to certain cancers, birth defects, and other health problems. In a statement to the NewsHour today, the EPA said it will provide transparent, science-based information on how the chemicals are evaluated. The EPA
and I don't like these huge monocrops and mega farms. It absolutely destroys the soil, destroys the land, destroys the nation. I like regenerative farming. These have to happen with multi-crops on smaller farmers. I think you need a decentralized approach to farming where you have local farmers providing food for their local cities, and that should be the foundation. And if they can't quite keep up with that, have 1 or 2 mega farms. But what's going on right now, they're trying to put the squeeze on small farmers and put the money in the pockets of big agriculture. Okay, we're going to move on to the Chinese section today. And man, there was a lot of stories coming out of China with what's going on with Ukraine, Russia, what's going on with Venezuela and the US. We're now seeing China kind of put its muscle around in that Asian Pacific region.
From DD Geopolitics, China has quietly drawn up a strike map for Japan. Beijing is signaling that if Tokyo keeps escalating over Taiwan, it will treat Japan as a hostile state under Articles 53, 77, and 107 of the UN Charter. The map outlines PLA missile flight paths into Japan, targets across Honshu, Kyushu, and Hokkaido, many of them nuclear plants, launch sites in China and the Korean Peninsula, submarine strike zones positioned around Japan. If Japan resumes what Beijing sees as militaristic policies or deeper involvement in Taiwan, China is prepared to respond with force.
Yeah, and Japan's been throwing its weight around, and a lot of countries in the Asian Pacific want their independence. They don't want to have to go through China for everything. That being said, Taiwan has been militarized for decades now. It's going to be hard to kind of conquer. Japan's a wide open target, especially because they have nuclear power plants. You hit one of those, that's a massive disaster. Their cities are extremely densely populated, and it's really a wide open target for China. That being said, there's a series of articles here really showing China wanting to target not only Japan, but Taiwan as well. China has been doing fairly good before this point, before they were trying to throw around military might on really swaying the electors in Taiwan, in South Korea, and in other regions, making a lot of these civilian bases very China friendly. And it was only a matter of time, I thought, before you get favorable elections in a lot of these countries. That being said, we've seen this uprise of independence in the Asian Pacific region from Taiwan, from Japan, from South Korea, from a lot of Asian nations, kind of saying we want a multipolar economy in the Asian Pacific, not a Chinese-based economy. Let's go into the next article, and it has to relate to Beijing and China again.
From Korean, it's telling how Beijing moved this week, notifying the UN in writing, calling Trump directly, naming Japan's comments the first explicit military threat against China since 1945. This isn't diplomacy as usual. It's China documenting every step in public and in sequence, so no one gets to pretend that they were surprised later. When a major power stops warning and starts notifying, the timeline has already changed.
Yeah, and this is very similar to what Russia did before they attacked Ukraine. So there was a series of legal events that took place, and it was very obvious that they were going to go into Ukraine. A lot of Western media might not show that side of the story, but that's the case. This could happen in China because they're taking the same kind of sequence of events of notifying the UN and putting the world on notice to where they think their toes are being stepped on. It's going to be very interesting. Let's go into the next couple articles because they do relate, and it's kind of building a larger picture. All this news is really recently breaking, and it's pretty surprising how things are heating up in that Asian Pacific region with China.
Posts. From World at War, Xi Jinping says Taiwan belongs to China. Chinese President Xi Jinping stated on November 24th that the return of Taiwan to China is a key part of the post-war international order. Xi Jinping made this assertion during a phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump, How far is China prepared to go in its pursuit of control over Taiwan?
Yeah, and this is big news because Xi Jinping actually addressed this issue directly with Donald Trump, and this is kind of one of those issues. It's a don't ask, don't tell policy. They tried not to bring it up and just move the chess pieces around the board without saying anything to each other, because this is a very sensitive topic for a lot of the countries in the Pacific region and for China itself. That being said, he had this phone call, and then Japan upped their level of assertiveness in the region. So you have to be thinking Japan is working very closely with the United States, and China is trying to back a lot of players off of them right now. The United States has war-gamed war plans with China a lot in the past, and every single time they lose in every scenario except for one, and that's when they shut off shipping lanes. We have seen a lot of countries in the Asian Pacific really assert their dominance in their own territorial waters, either sinking Chinese boats or shooting water cannons and even missiles at some Chinese boats and blowing them up in that region, saying, this is our water, you don't come into it anymore. China has been playing really loosey-goosey with water territories, constantly intruding on Taiwan and Japan's water space, as well as South Korea. There was a story the other day about South Korea and Japan both fighting back. I think they want dominance over their water space, and I think they want to assert their own dominance and independence over their airspace as well. Okay, let's go into the next article, and it may be China as well.
From Corinne, this week revealed the real hierarchy of power in Asia. Beijing didn't merely respond to Japan, it documented Japan's missteps in real time. It refused to meet Senai Takaichi at the G20, froze the China-Japan-Korea summit, filed a UN letter, released the Xi-Trump call before Washington, and made one thing explicit: correct yourself or there is no conversation. No ambiguity, no diplomatic choreography, just a boundary drawn in daylight. And right after praising his very good relationship with Beijing and announcing a visit to China next April, Trump abruptly asked to speak with Tokyo. When China publishes receipts first, it's not posturing, it's saying something very simple: the era of strategic patience on Taiwan is over.
Yeah, and I'm sure China's looking at the United States with Venezuela and Russia with Ukraine right now, and they're saying, we want our piece of the pie. They're thinking it's a multipolar world, and the big players in this multipolar world get to say what goes on in the region. The one region that's having a lot of pushback is this Asian Pacific region, because you have a few smaller players that do have a bit of military might, and if they strategically align with each other, they can really push back on China, especially if America backs them.
Do you want me to play the video or not?
Yeah, let's play the video a little bit. And that article kind of went into the last one, saying how they were getting their paperwork in line and kind of putting their complaints into the UN and other things. But they're also cutting off talks with Japan at a lot of places they would have naturally been, like the G20 summit. Xi Jinping and the Japanese leader were both expected to be there, and they absolutely don't want to talk. They want to be able to get Japan in line without even saying a word. Okay, and you can stop it. It's just music, and I don't want to get dinged for the music.
Yes, and Walker. Hello, Walker.
Oh, good to see you, Walker.
Walker says the CCP has armed forces for multiple purposes: maintaining borders, opposing the U.S., and primarily oppressing its own population. Taiwan has armed forces with a single objective: to stop the CCP.
Yeah, the big thing is going to be able to have these smaller countries take control of their territorial waters, which I've kind of talked about today in previous episodes. They're no longer allowing Chinese vessels or planes into their airspace or their water space. But once they assert their dominance in their own little regions, I think you're going to see the U.S. kind of move in on strategic choke points, which will cut off a lot of manufacturing coming out of shipping lanes, and it would absolutely cripple the Chinese economy. And this is what the U.S. has war-gamed in the past. Without their manufacturing base being able to be shipped all around the world, I think you would see the Chinese economy absolutely collapse. They don't have a big enough internal economy at this point.
And Walker also says, let's see if more countries that are angry with the CCP don't join in. Like more of those in the AUKUS, India, all countries who see their maritime sovereignty violated by the CCP.
Yeah, I actually think we may have the story of India if I pulled it. I can't remember if I pulled it, but they're trying to portray their dominance over India currently, and I don't think it's a good idea. India has been cooperating with Russia a lot. Russia is an ally of China. Therefore, this was an opportunity for China to improve their relations with India. I'll talk about it a little bit just in case I didn't pull the story, but there has been ongoing feuds in the mountains between India and China, and now China is saying they're going to really start inserting their dominance.
Asserting their dominance.
Okay.
But I mean, I will say the CCP has invaded a lot of waterways all over the world, and they have been using that to exploit resources, but also gain intelligence. So I, again, wouldn't be surprised if more countries don't say, hey, stop it, especially if they all join together.
Well, and a lot of people like to portray China as this very peaceful country. We don't go outside our own borders, but that's not the case. In an article we're going to bring up, it might be the next article. Why don't you click on it?
From Silencers.
No, this wasn't it. Click on the next one. There's one with a bunch of flags, I think. Okay, you can go back to that one. I think you grabbed the wrong article, but that's fine.
Okay. Do I go with this one?
Yeah, go with that one, and I'll actually get the information on my iPad here.
Okay, from Silencers, China and Russia are reportedly preparing to sign a defense pact with Iran, a trilateral alliance shaking Washington and putting Tel Aviv under the most serious existential threat yet. The world is shifting. The Tehran-Moscow-Beijing axis is signaling the end of unchecked American dominance, and the message is unmistakable. Any war on Iran is a confrontation with two nuclear powers as well.
Yeah, this is a very important military alliance for that region. If they stick together, it's going to be very hard to kind of pull them apart. The BRICS economy is really based around these three economies. And I think that's why Trump had that strategic strike on Iran. He wanted to weaken and really probe this alliance, see if they would stick together. And so far, so good. They really have. Trump's going to have to really improve economic relations with Russia to try to pull them apart from China as much as possible. I really don't think it's going to work, but I think it will really benefit the United States to have Russia as a trading partner overall. And I think it will keep a lot more peace in a lot of these regions if Russia and the U.S. has a lot of economic ties. Transitioning away from the Chinese economy and maybe a little bit more into the Russian economy may be a good idea overall. This was the actual one that I wanted here. Yeah.
From Arun Pudur, China does not recognize Taiwan, Arunachal and Aksi Hind, Senkaku Islands, Doklam, Humla, land border, sea.
Okay, we can leave it there. There's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 13 small nations that have islands or island nations within that region that China doesn't recognize. The reason they don't recognize them is they're probing their waters and they want to get military control of those little islands. They think it's in their best interest. But let's read the second half here.
Time for the world to not recognize Chinese-occupied Tibet, East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Manchuria, Hong Kong, and Macau.
Yeah, and all those regions were taken back by China, and they really implemented CCP authoritarian dominance. So let's not think China's this big, peaceful country that's not invading other regions. They're going into Tibet. They want to go into Taiwan. We'll see if it happens. I think Taiwan has been appropriately backed up by the other powers in the region, as well as militarized by the United States, where it's really a porcupine and it's going to be hard to attack.
But also with China going into, for example, Latin America with investments that then they couldn't sustain, so they have now left, also because of tariffs that a lot of Latin American countries have finally put on there. But now a lot of Latin American countries owe a lot of money to China still. And with China trying out its new payment system and its new coin and almost forcing that on other regions that it thinks it can continue to dominate, like Africa.
Yeah, there's a lot of things with this currency that's coming up. I'll go into it. A lot of it has to go into a conspiracy theory area, but let's read this and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the different perspectives.
From Jackson Hinkle, Standard Bank, Africa's largest financial institution, becomes first African lender to fully integrate China's SWIFT payment alternative, CIPS.
Yeah, and their payment alternative is going to be interesting if it actually works. A lot of these countries want to decouple from the SWIFT system, especially if the European Union seizes the Russian assets. Nobody's assets are going to be safe in these European Union and these SWIFT banks. So you'll see a mass exodus of money out of the European banks if they do decide to seize that Russian money. Another thing is the United States is holding trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. One possible way is to create an internal and an external currency with the United States. It has kind of been talked about, and then collapsing one of the currencies and paying off their debt with the other currency. There's a lot of interesting moves kind of happening right now with the US currency, with the Chinese BRICS currency, with digital currency overall, really being pressed with digital ID into a lot of supposedly sovereign nations, which it's just very suspicious. Digital ID and digital currency is being pressed simultaneously by almost every single Western nation at once, and China and Russia, and a lot of these global South countries are having digital currencies of their own.
From Coin Tribune, China officially launches a plan to promote its own payment system. As international monetary tensions intensify, China is accelerating its offensive against the dominance of the dollar. Beijing officially launches a strategic plan to impose its own international payment system. This initiative marks a major turning point in redefining global financial flows, reinforcing China's ambition for a multipolar economic order. By directly targeting the traditional networks dominated by the West, this maneuver now captures the attention of markets, governments, and major financial institutions.
Okay, and we can kind of leave it there, but I will say the way the Chinese are really trying to implement this new digital currency and these other currency plans or trade closure plans is very much more technologically advanced than the United States, and they're wanting to back a lot of it with gold. If your currency is backed with gold, other countries are going to have a lot more trust in it. They also want to exit a lot of their financial holdings outside of European and US banks, and they want to put it in this new financial system, and they know they have the backing of Iran and China. So you have a foundation there, especially when you start including Brazil. They're building vaults all around the world that hold gold, so you can take yen, and say you take $1 million worth of yen, you can buy $500,000 of product from China. That remaining $500,000 of yen, you can go to these Chinese vaults and exchange the yen directly for gold or their digital currency for gold. They're really trying to back it with gold to build a foundation of trust. Dollar for dollar or yen for yen with gold. It's going to be interesting if it works. The United States has to be hyper aware of this. I think they're making moves on Venezuela specifically for this one. This is one of the big reasons they're making moves on Venezuela. We'll have to see what happens.
Should we move on to Ukraine?
Yeah, let's move on to the Ukraine region, and a lot of developing circumstances going on with the peace negotiations. I've been keeping up on this for the last week and a half. It's now either coming to a conclusion or coming to a point where Trump may get pissed off with Russia if they don't accept this deal.
Well, you've been keeping up with the war since it started, essentially. From Eric Doherty, Ukraine officials agreed to the President Trump peace deal, according to ABC. This is massive. Terms have been agreed to, and the Ukrainians want Zelensky to head to Washington to make it final. Now we'll need Russia. Can he do it by 2026? The Ukrainians have agreed to the peace deal. There are some minor details to be sorted out, but they have agreed to a peace deal, a U.S. official said, per ABC. Army Secretary Driscoll has been speaking with the Russians.
Yeah, and it's not exactly as it was drawn up. It was a 28-point peace plan to begin with. I think it's a 19-point peace plan. Now I think the Ukrainians want to leave a lot of this stuff vague so they can flood their country with European troops. We got a couple articles about that. France, Germany, the UK do not want this war to end. They want it to continue. You can see by these statements that Macron's giving out, these are absolute red lines with Russia that they're not going to agree to. It's going to be very interesting at this point what kind of happens. There has to be things behind the scenes going on with Russia and the United States, that sanctions will be dropped and economic ties will be strengthened between those two countries. So maybe if there's enough offered to Russia on that end, they'll compromise on the front end of ending this war.
From Lord Bibo. Backup forces will be deployed away from the front lines in places like Kiev or Odessa. Macron on foreign troops being deployed in Ukraine after peace is reached. They will include British, French, and Turkish soldiers controlled through an intergovernmental coalition rather than NATO.
Yeah, this is an absolute red line, and it's not going to happen on Russia's part. They are winning the war with an onslaught of troops right now. I mean, they're taking mass kilometers of land every single day. They're in an advantaged position, and they keep pushing forward. That's what's pushing these negotiations forward. The European Union and the United States don't want to see a major collapse. They would rather take a loss on the negotiations. That being said, there's talks that they want to put 600,000 troops in Ukraine after. That would make it the biggest army in Europe and one of the biggest armies in the world. Russia has a red line that said no troops from the European Union. The European Union is saying, we're not going to call them NATO troops. We're going to make up a new name and a new organization, and it's going to be a coalition of troops from the European Union, but we're not going to call it NATO. They're playing games. They do not want long-term peace. The long-term strategy for the European Union to float them for the next 100 years has always been to invade Russia. That's why they've constantly moved NATO eastward. Trump and Putin, I think, both realized they have a common enemy in the globalists in the EU and the UK. Trump is trying everything he can to cripple these globalists. Having them take financial responsibility for the war was a big part of this. With Ukraine currently losing the war in such spectacular fashion right now, they would need a huge influx of money to even sustain themselves, which would absolutely bankrupt the EU. And the EU needs the United States to step up to continue this thing. So I don't know what's going to happen. Trump doesn't want any part of this thing. Macron, not only in this clip, but in another clip we have, is trying to sabotage these talks before they even make it over to Russia.
La première chose qui protégera l'Ukraine, c'est sa propre armée. Et donc tout le débat qu'il y a eu à Genève ces derniers jours, c'était de ne pas...
If you can turn the volume down and read it for us.
Sure. Hold on, let me start again. The first thing that will protect Ukraine is its own army. And the whole debate in Geneva over the last few days has been about not limiting the Ukrainian forces. Oh, hold on, it's going too fast. I can't read that fast.
Just pause it as the subtitles come up.
Okay, hold on. And so the whole debate in Geneva over the last few days has been about not limiting the Ukrainian armed forces, because Russia's obsession, and this new case in the negotiations held in Istanbul in the spring of 2022, is to say that you must have an army of no more than 50 or 60,000 men. You can't put any limits on it. And so the first guarantee of security for the Ukrainians and for us is this robust army. So what do? We pilot its training, its equipment, its capacity to deploy over the coming months and years. The second component, second line, is what we call the reinsurance forces. This means that far from the front line, we've never planned to be in the front line, since we're not in charge of that. But in fallback sites in Kiev and Odessa, to give an example, things are planned. They have a confidentiality component. It's more
that's pretty good. But as you can see, he's saying he wants to build up a massive world army here from all these EU nations, put them into Ukraine, and then spark this war up when they're ready. Russia is winning this war right now. If they don't come to a negotiated peace, they're going to take all Ukraine. I don't think Russia actually wants to take all Ukraine. They want Eastern Ukraine, the Russian-speaking side. Otherwise, this turns into a never-ending war Afghanistan situation for them. Trump wants an end to this war. I think Putin wants an end. He's willing to compromise if there are economic gains to be made and strengthening ties with the U.S. They had also offered Russia an opportunity to make the G7 the G8 and allow Russia in. Russia says they want absolutely nothing to do with the European Union at this point. They will negotiate and have economic ties with the U.S. and the U.S. alone.
And Walker says Iran fortified itself with China and Russia, and Saudi Arabia with Pakistan in nuclear matters. I would say that doesn't usually work because people don't want to go to war for another country, but all those countries are dictatorships, so people's opinions are worth next to nothing.
Yeah, it's very interesting because with this Ukrainian war, it kind of got to show the military strength of these alliances. The European Union is absolutely impotent. They've outsourced their army to the United States and United States arms completely. That's obvious. The United States has a lot of little conflicts going on around the world, so they're stretched pretty thin. But the Russian allies in Iran and China have been making a lot of drones. North Korea has been sending a lot of troops. So it's very interesting overall, especially with China as a manufacturing base that can manufacture massive amounts of military equipment if a larger war breaks out. This was really a testing ground for what could happen in a potential world war. I don't think Donald Trump wants this to happen. I think he wants to strengthen relations with Russia while he economically decouples from China.
I think we have the response from Lavrov here to what Macron said.
Yeah, and this was actually supposed to be earlier on. I put the article a little bit later, but this was from what Macron was saying. Macron specifically said that in the media before they even got the peace plan on Putin's desk, that he's trying to sabotage it. And the message is heard loud and clear by Lavrov. Lavrov is one of the top officials in Russia.
Macron made a very aggressive statement today, saying that the only problem with Ukraine is Russia and its demands, saying that Russia is pursuing a strategic confrontation with the Europeans, that Europe must prove that they will never surrender in the face of a threatening force. He said that after the settlement, he intends to send troops to Kiev or Odessa. Those are just pipe dreams that have nothing to do with a real prospect for a peace settlement. So Macron...
Okay, and that's pretty good. The EU needs some way to rebuild this international army. I don't know if they have the funds, but if they continue to fund this war with Ukraine, they're going to go bankrupt and they'll never be able to build that army. And their only plan at that point will be to bring in the United States with a more favorable administration after Donald Trump. I think that's what they're thinking. If they do get a peace plan, they want to have massive loans being put out, buy massive amounts of military weapons, create a huge European Union army, either put them in Poland or Ukraine. Ukraine is the place they're looking at that they want to put them. We're going to see what happens here, but I think the EU definitely wants a larger war, and I think they want to wait Trump out on this one.
And from Emmanuel Macron to the U.S. says back off Europe's frozen Russian assets. Macron just told the U.S. to back off Europe's stash of frozen Russian assets, most of which are chilling in Belgium. The U.S. wants to use that cash for its plan to rebuild Ukraine after peace. Macron says that's cute, but Europeans will decide what to do with it. He's also not feeling the whole peace plan that would force Ukraine to give up land, forget NATO, and downsize its army. Macron says we want peace, but not capitulation. Basically, thanks for the effort, but maybe we'll let the actual people in Europe call the shots this time. From Politico.
Yeah, and the big three countries that are trying to sabotage this, especially after this peace negotiation or this supposed peace deal that Ukraine agreed on was sent over to Russia. Macron came out with statements today. The UK officials came out with statements today, and so did German officials. Macron's were the most outrageous, but all three countries definitely don't want an end to this war. That being said, these Russian frozen assets, Russia is more than willing to have those be given to the United States, $100 billion, to kind of keep peace on the ground and reinvest in Ukraine to help rebuild it. A lot of that would be going to, I think, eastern Ukraine. That being said, if the European Union takes these Russian frozen assets, right now they've just been frozen. Ursula von der Leyen wants to take these Russian frozen assets. If she does, it's going to expedite the collapse of the European banking system, because foreign governments will no longer want to keep their money within the European banks because they'll feel that it is completely unsafe. Also, on top of that, there's another wrinkle, and that is Russia has privately owned assets by European corporations to the tune of $450 billion, or estimated to be around $450 billion. They've already said if they take the Russian frozen assets, the European Union does, that they will take the private corporations $450 billion, which could possibly have a add-on effect of collapsing the European stock market and having a huge negative effect on European companies.
And Walker says, creating a unified European armed forces, my second favorite soap opera since the 1960s, after the USA versus Latin American communists soap opera.
Yeah, I think Trump and Putin and a lot of these countries are trying to put pressure on the European Union to dismantle NATO. I think it's only a matter of time before hopefully the US actually pulls out of NATO. I don't know if they can do it. If they do, it would be the best decision they made in a long time. On top of that, you're seeing cracks within the European Union. The liberal globalists were able to get a consensus vote on everything they wanted, but now you're seeing a lot of the rise of the right through Hungary, through Poland, through a lot of these other countries really want their sovereignty and their autonomy back. They don't need another layer of government. They want to govern themselves. There are a lot of loans given out to these European countries to kind of keep them in line.
From Megatron, German cities on the brink nearly could go bankrupt, according to German Bild. Industrial slump cuts revenue while social costs soar. Total deficit is 30 billion euro. Europe's wallets are cracking.
Yeah, and I had another post I actually wanted to get for this. We grabbed the wrong one. That's okay. It went much more in depth. Germany right now is the centerpiece that holds, or the keystone that holds the entire European Union together. All the banking, all the infrastructure, everything that holds the European Union together is really based in Germany. They are the leaders of the European Union, and if they collapse, other countries will follow like dominoes. I really think the UK or France will collapse before Germany. But that being said, Germany is not looking good these days, and a lot of this has to be because of the Ukraine war and the amount of funding they're constantly having to pump into it. They wanted the United States to kind of step up, but as soon as Trump got in there, he's like, no, this isn't my war. I'm not funding it. If you want to continue it, you have to fund it. And it's put not only Germany, but the entire European Union in a really bad financial spot. And they're becoming more and more authoritarian with their digital IDs and their censorship. We see stories on this every single day.
I think I found it.
Okay, we can read
From
this.
Marianalfa, almost every German city is nearly bankrupt. Germany's local governments are imploding financially, with 30 billion in city-level deficits projected for 2025, up from 24 billion euro last year. Essence Mayor Thomas Kufen says almost every German city is on the verge of bankruptcy, including one's wealthy municipalities. In North Rhine-Westphalia, just 10 out of 396 cities have balanced budgets. The causes: exploding welfare costs, immigration, surging integration spending, and housing, education, and healthcare burdens tied to mass immigration, now costing the state 50 billion plus euro a year. Essen alone planned for a tiny 1.7 million surplus. Now it's staring at $123 million.
And every single country in the European Union looks like this. The European Union itself is leveraged to the hilt. They want to spend trillions of dollars in building this massive army to fight Russia. It's the worst thing they could do. They need to make Russia their trading partner and get cheap energy into Europe again so they can rebuild their manufacturing base. That being said, the European Union wants this war with Russia because if their financial systems or if countries begin to collapse on their own without a war, there's going to be nobody to blame. If their economies collapse during wartime, then they can blame the Russians or whoever else they want. Okay, let's go into the last couple stories here.
From Mario Naufal, German business group ends boycott of AfD as party surges in polls. Germany's political establishment just got a reality check from the business community. The Association of Family-Owned Companies has lifted its ban on meeting with AfD lawmakers, marking a significant shift as the Nationalist Party now leads in many nationwide polls. The group's president, Marie-Christine Ostermann, put it bluntly, indignation alone has exhausted itself as a political strategy. The move is pragmatic, not ideological, with AfD polling around 25% and sitting in first place after February's federal election. The association argues that ignoring a quarter of the electorate isn't a sustainable business strategy.
Okay, and you might recognize the AfD. This is one of the big populist parties within Germany. It's really on the come up. They absolutely hate this party. They've debanked them. They continue to be debanked, but the business community is now coming around and said we have to recognize them as a party. They're trying to de-party the AfD. They just can't seem to pass the legislation quite yet. It's going to be interesting on the next German election what happens with the AfD, because I would expect them to take power. In the UK, I would expect Reform UK to take power, and I don't think any of these parties are really favoring a larger scale war with Russia.
And however, we do see the other side of Germany, now including churches, praising Muslims. From Dr. Malouf, churches in Germany are now inviting imams to recite Muslim prayers and calls of their chant to appear more inclusive. Would the opposite ever be allowed?
Well, you're seeing a lot of churches being bought up by the Muslim community and turned into mosque, and they're trying to create this one world religion, whether it's the Pope trying to unite with Judaism or Islam. And now it's just like this one world global religion. They want this one world global government. It's absolutely sickening. I like the identity of each individual religion being separate, being to themselves, being decentralized.
Do you want me to play
Yeah,
them?
we can play it just so the people can get an idea.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Okay, and that's good. First thing they do is the call to prayer. The next thing, they're going to start handing out prayer mats and demanding allegiance to Allah with handing out Qurans as well.
And the problem is the forced compliance of all of these ideologies that will make up this one world governance and one world religion, and the fact that you can't say no. However, if it were on the other shoe or on the other side, you wouldn't be able to say anything at all. And we see the capturing of the most important institutions within society, one of them being churches and religion, especially Western religions, by this lie of multiculturalism, which forces this inclusivity and once again forces the compliance of it.
Okay, let's go into the last two articles here.
We have something about Barry Weiss.
Yeah, she's going back into mainstream media, and she's definitely has big backers. She is making tens of millions of dollars off of these deals, and she's trying to reshape the way the world thinks, or at least the way America thinks.
So, because Barry Weiss created the Free Press, which was like a Substack video enterprise platform, independent journalists, I don't know what to call them, and they brought together a lot of former lefties, but at the same time, again, they're
well, then then a lot of it got sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, which it wasn't worth that, and she made out like a thief in the night.
For CBS. From Dropside, Barry Weiss says she wants to use her new perch at CBS News to redraw the lines of what falls in the 40 yards of acceptable debate in American political and cultural life. She says the aim is to sideline voices like Hassan Piker, Tucker Carlson, and Nick Fuentes, and elevate charismatic figures such as Alan Dershowitz and Dana Loesch, who reflect where the vast majority of Americans actually are.
Well, yeah, what, she's going to have debates on
older ones
on national TV. Great for her, but now we have the internet, and the population can choose what they want to watch. There is no such thing as what did they say there?
Acceptable
debates. Yeah.
Charismatic figures.
Well, I was looking for acceptable debates. They want to put guardrails and censorship on America, not just America, but the rest of the world globally, because the American media really extends out way beyond America.
But then we also see, for example, with Piers Morgan being able to be a traditional, or having been a traditional journalist or media figure, now bringing in the voices that she wants to say, coming from the independent journalist side. She wants to say, no, I don't want to platform these people now that I'm on the other side.
Okay, you can play it. And she sounds somewhat reasonable here, but this is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
All of us see the moment that we're in. And all of us see that the choices that it feels like we have sometimes, which is Hassan Piker and Tucker Carlson, or Nick Fuentes and, Andrew Tate, the kind of people that are rising in the podcast charts, those don't actually represent our values. And I don't think that they represent the values and the worldview of the vast majority of Americans. And so this is an opportunity to speak for the 75%, for the people that are on the center left and the center right that still believe in equality of opportunity, that still believe passionately in the...
Here's the thing. We want to see people's worldviews poked and their political systems poked. And people like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, even if you put them against a moderate, they're going to ask really tough questions. And tough questions should be asked back to them. But when you put two moderates together, they never really talk about the real issues.
The American project that still believe in all of the things that everyone in this room believes in, which is liberty and freedom and individual responsibility and in the most basic level, the right to know what is actually going on in the world. Not the world as propagandists and ideologues imagine it to be, but what's actually going on in the world and in your community so you can make decisions about where to send your kids to school.
I just did a 2-hour show or an hour show, whatever it is, showing what's going on in the world. She wants to show you the acceptable view of what's going on in the world. They want to be able to narrate the news and narrate America back into some kind of unified identity that they get to shape, mold, and fold, and then they can propagandize into the ways that they want to.
Well, they're scared because they were helping and they helped tear those guardrails down from what was acceptable in the media and to talk about, but now they want to build them back up under their own image and with their own ways of censorship.
Yeah. Okay, we can kind of leave it there and go into the last story of the day. We've gone kind of long today.
From Marinaval, Venice says to Greta Thunberg, thanks for the green water, now get out. Greta and her Extinction Rebellion crew, they used to annoy us to no end in Vancouver as well. Extinction Rebellion crew poured green dye into Venice's Grand Canal to protest climate inaction. They called the dye-filled canal protest a form of climate activism, but Italian officials labeled it as vandalism, and UNESCO raised concerns about potential damage to the historic site. Venice is one of my most favorite cities in the world, and it is annoying to see.
Yeah, and I can't believe this. Venice gave them a $172 fine. That's it. This is absolutely ridiculous. We're going to look at the clip here.
So dressed in red cloaks and veils, they also staged flash mobs and hung Stop Ecocide, which they just did, banners from the Rialto Bridge. Venice gave them a 48-hour ban and a $172 fine. The dye, they insist, was harmless. The city is less convinced. Looks like Chicago.
It's okay. Nuclear.
Okay, that's pretty good. But this eco-terrorism and getting a $172 fine is ridiculous. This just pushes them to do it even more when you have these lax fines. They should really arrest Greta Thunberg for this lunacy.
And then where does the water go when it goes into the ocean? What happens to the fish there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, Venice is incredibly polluted, but this isn't you shouldn't pollute it more.
No. Okay, thanks for tuning in today. If you're not liking and subscribe, please do so. This was our first time on Kick and Twitch, so hopefully everything worked out. I'll try to work out how we actually make a thumbnail on those platforms next time. We have a show tomorrow. It's actually me and Nat on camera on our main set, so if you want to tune in then, we'd love to see you there. Adios.
And thank you so much, Walker, for your comments.